Ghost has been among the best types in Pokemon ever since the first generation. In the early games, Ghost types were extremely scarce. There were barely any available to use. But over the years, this powerful type has received more Pokemon to its name, and the type has only gotten better with age, benefiting significantly from certain moveset cuts, mechanical changes, and shifts in the type chart. With 2 immunities to Normal and Fighting, which are very common types, Ghosts have plenty of opportunity to hit the field safely. Immunity to the utility attack Rapid Spin, and even the powerful Explosion, make Ghost types uniquely valuable. Ghost is also excellent offensively. Ghost plus Fighting is an amazing coverage combination, as Fighting will cover all of Ghost's resistances and immunities. Let's take a look at all the relevant examples of Ghost types in competitive singles throughout the generations, and how this fantastic type has only gotten better over time. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to ensure safe passage for the Linoon Legion, a new ally to the Mudcargo Alliance in the ongoing Horse Council civil war. Mudcargo himself has publicly denounced all Jimothy non-subscribers for their concerning lack of action in this ongoing conflict. Don't be like them. Thank you. In Gen 1, Ghost is one of the best types in the game, but the catch is, there's only one of them. There's only one person to talk about here. It's Gengar, an iconic Pokemon, of course, and one of the best Pokemon in the OU metagame of Gen 1. As the premier Ghost type, and only Ghost type really besides its miniature forms of Haunter and Ghastly, Gengar is immune to the Normal type, and Normal is the best type in this game, with some of the best attacks to its name such as Body Slam and Hyper Beam, Double Edge, Explosion. Immunity to all of that is extremely valuable. On top of this, Gengar is fast, it has a high speed, a high special stat, making it surprisingly bulky too, and has some good utility options. It's got Explosion itself, allowing it to be, kind of a special threat in a way with its access to Thunderbolt, and on top of that, it can trade with a Chansey or a Snorlax or something of that ilk. Nightshade is common for consistent damage and hypnosis, allows Gengar to put things to sleep, which is very powerful in a generation with limited status counterplay. It's weird, Nightshade in Gen 1 can hit normal types even though it's a Ghost type move. Don't ask me why, but that's just the truth of it. Another option, you can go Psychic. Psychic allows you to hit enemy Gengar, funnily enough, and got a special drop chance, pretty strong move overall with high power. Thunderbolt will be your go-to attack with Gengar in Gen 1 though, hitting such fellows as Starmie, Cloyster. Another option you might see on Gengar, probably not, but it's an option, is Mega Drain for grass coverage. Only has 40 power, which is a little bit pathetic, but it's times 4 super effective against Rhydon. The unfortunate truth of Gengar is that poison typing on top of this Ghost typing back in Gen 1 is a complete detriment. It doesn't really provide you any value. Poison as a status ailment is uncommon. Fighting resistance is useless, but even if that was valuable to you, you're already immune to fighting in the first place. But Psychic weakness stinks, and ground weakness is horrible, so Tauros and Rhydon give you some trouble. Even though you can come in on their normal type attacks, you take issue with their ground type attacks. They can snipe you on the way in, making Gengar a little bit unsafe as a guaranteed Tauros or Snorlax switch in. Mega Drain can help you in the Rhydon matchup if you want. Maybe that's a team dependent thing you can do. But yeah, that's the downside to Gengar in Gen 1, is that it's kind of under fire by a lot of common stuff. Explosion immunity comes up a lot though. Explosion immunity is incredibly valuable. And as for other moveset options, you might also see Confuse Ray. I've seen this sometimes. It's kind of good versus Snorlax. You can disrupt them a bit, be a bit of a menace, be a bit of a nuisance, and allow them to hit themselves, which can prevent them from resting too by disrupting their turn and stuff like that. That can be sometimes a path to breaking through certain targets, denying their healing. That's about it for Gen 1 this time around. A short segment, but what can be said, there's only a single Ghost type here. But who needs any more Ghost types besides the wonderful Gengar? And Gengar would go on to be a mainstay of many following generations, as we will shortly see. In Generation 2, they added a single additional Ghost type, good on them, but Gengar remained the best, as you could probably expect, and in Gen 2, Gengar became a lot more interesting. It can now hold an item, and it had more coverage. Ice Punch was now an option, a new special attack, Fire Punch. Gengar now has an important role of blocking Rapid Spin. The existence of Rapid Spin was kind of you could think of it as a buff to the Ghost type, because they're more valuable on teams. Blocking Rapid Spin prevents the hazard removal effect from happening on Rapid Spin, so Gengar's role in that department was very important. Gengar unfortunately still weak to ground. That's a problem it faces, and Tyranitar was introduced in this generation, who is a pursuit user. So now there's a bit of counterplay to ghost types in the form of pursuit. Tyranitar is able to trap and eliminate Gengar pretty well. Gengar was already great, and now it feels even more useful and a bit more varied in what it can do. Another option you can use on this guy is Dynamic Punch as a way to hit Snorlax and Tyranitar. It's obviously unreliable, it's only 50 accuracy, but it's a mixed attacking option, a fighting type attack that can confuse them if it does hit, which can be good. You can sometimes get out of a jam with this, hit a Tyranitar that was about to pursuit trap you, confuse them, give them trouble. A great option on Gengar is to actually run no item on it and use the move Thief to steal the enemy's items. This is a good offensive strategy in Gen 2 because leftovers are introduced in this generation and they're on just about every Pokemon, by far the most common item. Cutting leftovers healing from an incoming target like Snorlax or Zapdos is enormous. That'll pay dividends over the course of a game. Another new tool up Gengar's sleeve in Gen 2 was the new move Destiny Bond. A move that, when you use it, your Destiny Bond is now active, and if the opponent knocks you out, if you faint, they also faint. So it's a way to trade with enemies if you think they're going to try and KO you. It can be a nice way to unexpectedly eliminate their Tyranitar. If they're trying to trap you, you pull out the Destiny Bond, and they're going down with you now. Interesting move. Definitely has applications later in the series too. It's crazy just how much Gengar received in Gen 2. A lot of new tools here. Gengar also gained this, Mean Look and Perish Song. Mean Look is a new move that allows you to trap the enemy Pokemon, preventing them from switching out. And with Perish Song, which causes all active Pokemon to faint in 3 turns, this combo can trap and eliminate certain things. I mean, this can be a great option, a great thing to build around, especially if you can eliminate something like Snorlax, a very important enemy. It does take multiple turns, so you're going to be under fire from the Pokemon you're trying to trap, and Gengar's not the most defensively fantastic thing in the world anymore. Ever since the special split, it has a lower special defense stat effectively than it did in Gen 1, so it's under more fire from attacks. But this can work. It can be a good strategy. However, there is another ghost type in the game named Misdreavus, an all-new Pokemon that is a little bit more common with the Mean Look Perish Song set than Gengar is because of its mono ghost typing. Without that secondary poison typing, it has less weaknesses. It's not weak to psychic and ground anymore, making it more consistent at pulling off this Perish trap with less Pokemon that can actually threaten it super effectively. And Misdreavus can also fill the role of that good old spin blocking, explosion blocking, and other such things. You can also run this kind of Misdreavus set, I suppose, with Thief, just like Gengar can. Misdreavus does have similar tools, and it sets itself apart from Gengar with the mono typing. Usually you prefer Gengar if you're running something like this with attacks and Thief and stuff. Gengar's faster, a bit more threatening. But Misdreavus has those tools as well, and some teams you might consider Misdreavus because of its pure ghost typing, which has its value. In Generation 3, they went ahead and made some actual cool new ghost types. Interestingly, many of them were a little bit on the weaker side. Maybe they have some awareness of the power of ghost type, and they didn't want to make them too good. But some interesting characters here. And Gengar became significantly better in Gen 3. The role of blocking Rapid Spin is now more important because you can stack more spikes on the field, and the permanent Sandstorm of Tyranitar makes that spike stacking game plan even better because Sandstorm cuts leftovers healing from so many things, making that spikes damage permanent against important threats like Celebi, Suicune, Blissey, etc., Snorlax. So Gengar is greatly enhanced by this metagame shift, and our favorite ghost also received a lot of new tools this time around. Most notably the ability Levitate, which is an enormous buff, granting an immunity to ground. Gengar was previously weak to ground, now he's immune. That's massive. On top of this, Levitate also grants an immunity to spikes damage. That's arguably even more important than the ground immunity in this metagame where spikes are such a common strategy, and you can now stack spikes, and so many teams are built around Skarmory's spikes now. Levitate also grants you an immunity to Dugtrio's Arena Trap effect. You can just switch out against Dugtrio. That's another important factor. But that's not all. Gengar also received Will-O-Wisp, a status move that simply applies burn to the target. Hugely impactful. Burn has a lot of residual damage associated with it. You take 1/8 of your health every turn. That's a lot. On top of that, it can hit steel types that Toxic cannot hit. Toxic is quite popular, but Poison and steel types are immune to it. Will-O-Wisp can hit those types and actually apply a damaging status ailment to them, which is significant. And Burn halves physical damage output, so you can cripple things like Metagross and Snorlax from doing any damage. Will-O-Wisp is really hard to switch into. Only fire types are immune to it, and there aren't that many fire types in the metagame. Just Charizard and Moltres, who are both slower than you and weak to Thunderbolt, so not exactly a clean answer answer to your Will-O-Wisp. Famously difficult move to respond to in this metagame, and one of the reasons Gengar is so great. Gengar also received Taunt here, a new move that disrupts the enemy from using status moves. This can deny a Blissey from healing, deny certain things from trying to Thunder Wave you or incapacitate you somehow, deny a Suicune from using Rest or trying to boost up with Calm Mind to 1v1 you. There are so many cool applications for Taunt. What's interesting is in Gen 3, Taunt is less powerful. They buff it later, but in Gen 3, Taunt only lasts for 2 turns. From Gen 4 onwards, it would last for 3, but it's still very useful for denying stuff like spikes, healing, boosts, status, all kinds of things. Gengar still commonly using the Thunderbolt and Ice Punch combo and the occasional Fire Punch for that kind of coverage. Gengar can now use Giga Drain for grass coverage that also heals you, and this has useful application against Swampert, dealing ×4 super effective damage to it and healing a significant amount of health after that. Giga Drain can also help you out against Tyranitar if they're trying to pursuit you. Sometimes 1v1 them depending on the mind games of the situation, because you will heal off the damage you take from pursuit while dealing pretty good damage to them because of the grass being super effective. If you prefer having higher power and higher PP, because Giga Drain only has 60 power and 8 PP, you can go Hidden Power Grass for similar coverage. Doesn't heal you, but it's more consistent overall with less chance of being stalled and stuff like that. Explosion remains ever valuable as it has in previous generations. And Gengar can now use Focus Punch, which is a fun fringe option on it, often alongside Hypnosis to apply sleep as it used to in Gen 2. Well, Focus Punch is a new move that you tighten your focus, and if you don't get hit by any kind of attack, you will then deal a massive 150 base power fighting type physical move. So you can put a Tyranitar to sleep that's trying to pursuit you and then hit him with the big Focus Punch. You can also catch Snorlax and Blissey trying to switch in against you. There is also a lot of nuance to how to EV Gengar. Gengar's EV spreads vary a lot. Like, look at this one. This is a common one. It's hitting very specific benchmarks. I believe this is the set that lives a +1 Salamence Hidden Power Flying while also surviving a pursuit and hitting enough speed to outrun non-plus speed Salamence, Zapdos, and Jirachi and other such base 100 speed fellas. Very intricate stuff, and that's just one EV spread possible for Gengar. Very customizable Pokemon with the EV spreads, the moveset options. I will one day make a dedicated video about Gen 3 Gengar, because it's a very versatile, or very is an understatement. It is perhaps the most versatile Pokemon in any metagame I've played before. I'm a huge fan of Gengar and what it adds to Gen 3, personally. But we have a new Ghost type on our hands, ranked in the UUBL tier, respectable. Dusclops is a decent choice. It is a far more defensively oriented Ghost type, with massive 130 base defense and special defense. Low HP, but you can just give it EVs to make up for that a little bit. Dusclops is an interesting choice on stall teams because of its fantastic bulk, its role as a rapid spin blocker, and its ability Pressure, which makes it so Pokemon consume twice as much PP when they use moves against you, which has a lot of useful applications in longer games, giving Dusclops a nice role on stall teams. Now, my favorite Dusclops set runs... I don't like these Pain Split sets because I think Dusclops is vulnerable to status, and Pain Split is not the most reliable way to heal. I prefer, Rest and Imprison is a cool option because Imprison can allow you to be a Snorlax counter. With Imprison, you prevent the foe from using any move that you also know. So Snorlax can no longer hit you with Shadow Ball because you have Shadow Ball yourself, and they can't rest to heal themselves because you also have Rest. This is a set by ABR, which I thought was a really cool optimization for Dusclops that made it, in my opinion, a lot better. A lot of those stally teams can struggle in the Snorlax matchup. That's what Dusclops can provide for you there. Will-O-Wisp is always good, and unlike a Gengar, you can make a bit better use of physical Ghost type attacks. Before Gen 4, Ghost type attacks could only be physical. So unfortunately Gengar can't really use its Ghost Stab. It has plenty of options other than that for attacks, but Dusclops can. And what's nice about this is that Dusclops is a spin blocker that can hit two of the most common rapid spinners super effectively with its Stab Shadow Ball. Starmie is weak to Ghost, that's a common rapid spinner, and Claydol is weak to Ghost, another common rapid spinner. Gengar is a little bit more vulnerable to Claydol than Dusclops is because Gengar has the poison typing, meaning it is weak to Stab Psychic from Claydol. Same with Starmie. Some Starmies run Stab Psychic to hit Gengar. Dusclops, while it does take more spikes damage because it doesn't have Levitate like Gengar does, Dusclops, way more defensively solid, can be a better fit on stally teams. Now, everybody say a hearty hello to Banette, my favorite Ghost type in the whole series. I love this guy. Funny little puppet. I grew a fondness for this Pokemon after experimenting with it myself and discovering that it actually has some stuff in Gen 3 OU. I am a big time Banette believer. What's awesome about Banette, like I just said about Dusclops, using Ghost type physical attacks to actual effect. Take a look at this. Bennett has a 115 base attack stat. So this Shadow Ball actually hits pretty damn hard and can directly threaten Claydol and Starmie for enormous damage. On top of this, you can get that good old Ghost+Fighting combo. Hard to achieve this in Gen 3, with not many ghost types that can do this very well, but what's fantastic about this is that Tyranitar with Pursuit can't really come in against you and beat you, because you have Hidden Power Fighting, which hits them ×4 super effective. Pursuit Tyranitar is designed to beat Ghost, but Bennett kind of sidesteps this by directly threatening Tyranitar with such significant damage. Can't quite one-hit KO, but if they come in on like one spike and a Shadow Ball, they'll be in range. It's very easy to chip them into range of HP fighting. And on top of that, you got Will-O-Wisp, always great. This can apply a lot of pressure to like Skarmory, Blissey, and Taunt to deny Skarmory from making spikes, deny Blissey from healing, deny heaps of stuff. A lot of useful applications of Taunt with this. Insomnia is also an ability that comes in handy, granting an immunity to sleep. You can pivot this in against Breloom, clicking Spore. You're immune, and then you can like Will-O-Wisp it or just attack it or whatever you want. Pretty useful. The downside to Bennett though is that it does not have Levitate, meaning it is very vulnerable to spikes, and its defensive stats pretty much don't exist. 65 base defense, 63 base special defense. If Claydol clicks Earthquake instead of Rapid Spin as this comes in, it's going to take a lot of damage. And with spikes up, Bennett really doesn't stick around for long. Bennett is like a hyper offense Pokemon. If you just come in once, block a Rapid Spin, and then nothing loves coming in against you because you have that incredible Ghost+Fighting coverage combo and Will-O-Wisp, which is very difficult to come in against. Bennett can give you that little short-term momentum boost that you can carry to victory. Blocking Rapid Spin maybe once or twice, applying a lot of pressure from there, and doing good work overall. I have respect for Bennett. I think it's cool. It's Puppet. It's got a zip on its mouth. He's not talking to anybody. He's not saying anything. Thank you for listening to my Bennett analysis. Misdreavus has become the second most popular ghost in the OU format, even more popular than Dusclops, despite being lower ranked, mostly because it has Levitate now, just like Gengar does, which is really good. And what Misdreavus does that Gengar doesn't is it can check Claydol a lot better. It's just like Dusclops, not weak to that Psychic, but Dusclops is Spikes vulnerable, so Misdreavus is defensively quite nice in Generation 3, and it feels a little bit better with the Meanlock Parasong combo, similar to Gen 2, because it's not weak to as many things. Misdreavus is commonly used on Superman archetypes, which is a team style that aims to use as many spike immune Pokemon as reasonable. Misdreavus can be a spin blocker and an alternative to Gengar that is a little bit nicer at doing the Meanlock Perish and eliminating key targets that are problematic for Superman, which is a cool niche that it has. Sableye is an interesting one. Pokemon introduced in Gen 3, it's NU ranked, and it doesn't have Prankster yet, it only has Keen Eye, which simply makes you immune to accuracy lowering, not very useful. Its stats are not the best either. It's an early game Pokemon, you find it in that cave, don't you? It's not really designed to be a showstopper or particularly great, but ABR, who is one of the best Pokemon players of all time, thought Sableye had some potential because it's a dark ghost type, meaning it is immune to Psychic, which is kind of nice against Claydol, isn't it? Sableye is also the only ghost with access to Recover for reliable healing. Misdreavus has to rely on Rest. Dusclops has to rely on Rest, which leave you vulnerable for 2 turns, sitting there sleeping, snoozing away. Sableye can actually just recover itself by its own volition. Also gets Knockoff. Knockoff is very rare in Gen 3, barely anything gets it, and it's one of the best moves in the entire game. Reliably making progress against the enemy by just deleting their item from existence. In particular, Leftovers, getting rid of Leftovers with sand on the field, represents a lot of value long term. So that's a huge get for Sableye. That's basically it. I mean, Seismic Toss is just something to do. ABR arrived at Psych Up for the last move slot. You can probably try other things, but Psych Up allows you to copy the boosts from Snorlax. If they're curse boosting up, you copy them and you have enough defense to now 1v1 it. You know, knock off their Leftovers and Seismic Toss them in the sand, hopefully getting through them. So that's a little tech for the Snorlax matchup that can be useful. I've got a video about this if you're interested in the Sableye discovery. And finally we have Shedinja, an intriguing Pokemon design, isn't it? It's got 1 HP, and it can't get bonus HP from EVs. Impossible to do so. However, it has the ability Wonder Guard, granting it various immunities. It can only be damaged by super effective moves, and indirect damage, meaning it is completely immune to most types in the game. So that is the benefit, making up for its singular point in HP, and the fact that it will feint to absolutely anything. What stinks about Shedinja in Gen 3 though is that because spikes and sand are such central strategies in this metagame, it is under fire at all times. A single damage from Sandstorm Chip KOs you in 1 hit. A single spike KOs you in 1 hit. So Shedinja has a big uphill battle to even attempt to exist in Gen 3 OU. Shedinja can sometimes be used in Ubers, because it can come in against like Kyogre. Kyogre doesn't have anything to hit Shedinja. And it can wall other specific targets too in Ubers, like Mewtwo sometimes, if they're not running a fire move, which is a big if, but you know. And Shedinja was also famously used by Super Epic Ampharos in a story that I covered in my most popular video upload here on the Jimothy Cool channel, as a Spikes sack. Because it only has 1 health, you can sack it to Spikes and have it faint very reliably. It will just faint every time. You don't have to chip it into range of the faint. And Spike sacks are really good because in Gen 3, when a Pokemon faints, the enemy can't act and you can do whatever you want. So Spike sacks, because a switch is the first thing that happens when you're switching to a Pokemon, it's almost like they're trapped. You can force a specific interaction by switching to something, sacking it to Spikes, and then pivoting to whatever you want. Sometimes that's Dugtrio or Magneton, so they don't even have a chance to stop it. That can be a great way to ensure a specific sequence that is good for you. Obviously, that's like very advanced stuff. I wouldn't recommend like dedicating a whole Pokemon slot to just a Spike sack, but that's what Super Epic Ampharos is built around, which was interesting. And then the stars absolutely aligned, and Super Epic Ampharos in fact faced against a team without Spikes or Sand, and Shedinja could actually exist. What are the odds of that? That was a crazy thing that happened, wasn't it? I still can't believe that one. But yeah, don't use Shedinja. I keep seeing people use Shedinja because of that video, despite the fact that I made it very clear that it's an idiotic idea. Shedinja is weak to Sand and Spikes in the Sand and Spikes metagame. I mean, folks, it's a no-brainer, but it does exist, and we can acknowledge its existence, can't we? In Gen 4, a lot changed for Ghost types. This might be the generation where they feel a little bit bad, actually, because Tyranitar could now use Physical Pursuit. The physical special split was in place. Pursuit was now a physical attack. Tyranitar, with its high attack stats, now was the bane of Ghost's existence. Just about every Ghost type was now in fear of its life at every turn because of the potential of a Pursuit Tyranitar trap, which became even more common than it was previously. In Gen 3 and Gen 2, Tyranitar had to rely on a special attack for such a thing. And in Gen 3, that required you to specifically invest EVs into special attack to actually have enough damage on Pursuit to trap anything. And even then, Gengar could EV out of range of that Pursuit, live it once, and there was more avenue to actually play around Pursuit Tyranitar for the Ghost types. But now it's a different story. Now Ghosts are under big time pressure. They feel a little bit more dangerous to use this time around. But there is one Ghost type that absolutely soared to the top in Gen 4, the all new Rotom forms, which prior to Gen 5 were all Ghost types. Electric Ghost typing alongside Levitate is excellent defensively. Rotom Wash and its other forms have decent enough defensive stats, access to Will-O-Wisp, and with, defense investment and Will-O-Wisp to hit Tyranitar coming in, you can actually withstand the Pursuit a little bit. Often they run Rest and Sleep Talk for a bit more defensive longevity, some healing. A common Pokemon on balanced teams as a spin blocker and, a check to fighting types, all the benefits that Ghost provides. You can go in a more offensive direction though, if you like, with a Choice Scarf set, which has a lot of utility. Can check something like Gyarados, outrunning it after Dragon Dance, hitting with a Thunderbolt. Trick has its uses, giving a Choice Scarf to something that might not want it. And Gengar's back again ranked in OU, but it doesn't feel like the same Pokemon anymore, because now it can use Shadow Ball, which is a special attack, and that's what it uses the vast majority of the time now. Gengar can now achieve that good old Ghost Fighting coverage combination, with access to Focus Blast, everybody's favorite attack, the 70% accurate move that always seems to miss when you need it to hit the most. This is now Gengar's primary line of attack against Tyranitar. Instead of trying to evade it with defensive EVs and F around with all that, Gengar simply tries to just click Focus Blast against it and get a KO. But that can be dubious, can't it? Focus Blast can miss, they could have a Choppleberry, they could have a Choice Scarf and other such things. It's a solid Pokemon that you gotta respect, has high special attack and speed, it's threatening, it's good. I don't personally love using it in the Gen 4 metagame. I think compared to Gen 3 especially, Gengar doesn't feel very consistent anymore. The reliance on Focus Blast is a big reason, and the constant fear of that Pursuit Tyranitar just makes Gengar feel difficult to justify using on teams for me. I would much rather use Rotom. Frostlass was also introduced in Generation 4, and this is my favorite of the new Ghost types, design-wise. Love the Ice Ghost type combination. Cool set of tools and traits. It's got spikes on it, which is really nice, giving it a role as a hazard-setting lead. Well, in the past, I suppose, because Frostlass has now unfortunately been banned from Gen 4. Frostlass has the ability Snow Cloak, which grants evasiveness in hail. So there were some cheesy strategies where Frostlass would be used alongside Abomasnow to create hail, and then Frostlass had that evasion. It could abuse that, fish for misses. Evasion tends to be an unhealthy mechanic in competitive singles, creating uninteractive situations. But a lot of people were unhappy with how this ban was handled, because Frostlass was not always used on hail teams. Sometimes it was just used for its unique offensive tools, access to spikes, its use as a lead. It wasn't even being used for that cheese stuff. It was being used in an honest manner. And Abomasnow is not a super common Pokemon, so it's not as if you're going to magically face an enemy Abomasnow. That is a very unreliable thing to count on. And if that happens, we could call that an outlier. That's how many people saw it. But unfortunately, they just banned the ability Snow Cloak outright. What a lot of people did want was them to ban the combination of Abomasnow and a Snow Cloak user. That would be a cleaner ban that prevents the cheese strategy that people were using while preserving the honest use of Frostlass that many players enjoyed. But unfortunately, that's not the case. I hope they change this one. They do the complex ban instead. It will be nice to be able to use Frostlass in Gen 4 OU again, because it's a cool Pokemon. It's got Destiny Bond to trade with enemies in the lead. It can make spikes early on. It's got Icy Wind for some speed control, or Ice Beam if you prefer more damage. I really enjoy it. I think it's a fun Pokemon. Bring back Frostlass. Gen 4 Council. Where are you? Bring back Frostlass. Dusknoir is an interesting one. This was a new evolution for Dusclops introduced in Gen 4 that, when Gen 4 was current, this guy was actually popular, and it was OU ranked by usage. But these days, it's fallen off a little bit. Interesting Pokemon though. I think the big reason for its fall off is that it's kind of just outclassed by Rotom, who has a similar ghost typing, but way more defensive value with its access to levitate and higher speed and more useful attacking moves. Dusknoir has a decent attack stat, but it's under fire from all the hazards, the spikes. It's not that bulky, and it lacks a reliable form of healing as well. It could have potential though. It looks good. The stat distribution looks good. It's got cool options. Maybe it can like focus punch an incoming Tyranitar or something. That's gaming. I don't know. Maybe Dusknoir still has application. Maybe people still use it sometimes, but not deserving of an OU rank for sure. If it's used, it's uncommonly. And another new ghost type in the game, an evolution for Miss Drevis, was Miss Magius, who is also kind of outclassed by both Rotom and Gengar. It's like in between both of them, where it's mono ghost, unlike Gengar, and it's faster than Rotom. Maybe you could use this because it's mono ghost and therefore is not weak to psychic, and Jirachi's common, so maybe psychic weakness is something you don't want. But that is a very niche situation. That could be possible. In Gen 5 we have some new ghosts to play with, but only 2 are ranked OU. The most popular ghost in Gen 5 is definitely Jellicent, who is a great fit in the metagame. With water ghost typing, Jellicent has the unique role of not only blocking rapid spin, but helping you out in rain matchups with its water immunity. Jellicent is also a great switch into Keldeo, immune to both water and fighting type attacks, which is Keldeo's stab combination. Jellicent can spread Will-O-Wisp. It can hold its own decently well against Tyranitar because of Will-O-Wisp. Even Scald it runs on some sets. It has reliable recovery and decent defensive stats to complement its good qualities elsewhere. The stats aren't great actually, but the combination of okay enough stats and great typing ability and move pool make Jellicent really good, and it's one of my favorite Pokemon in the Gen 5 metagame. It's never OU in anything else, it just fits well here. I like using it, it's satisfying to use in my opinion. And Gengar is ranked OU once again in Gen 5, using similar stuff it used back in Gen 4. Now it can at least see if the enemy has Tyranitar for sure, because of Team Preview, so you're not in the complete dark with respect to the Tyranitar incoming, but unfortunately for Gengar, Tyranitar runs Choppleberry like 90% of the time now, because it needs it to live Focus Blast from Alakazam, so your likelihood of getting through Tyranitar feels even less promising. You can Will-O-Wisp the guy, but you're also frail. You have no healing. Jellicent feels like a better ghost type to use for its spin blocking options. Gengar can still be used as like an offensive ghost if you want one, but I don't love it, especially in a world where Tyranitar feels so powerful and so great. Gengar can struggle with its poor longevity, difficulty actually getting much done in my opinion, in Gen 5. Perhaps I'm being a bit harsh, but I don't think Gengar feels great in the Gen 5 metagame to me. And the other most relevant ghost type you're going to see is probably Rotom base form, which actually has worse stats than all the other Rotom forms, but it's the only one that still has the electric ghost typing. So it can function the same way that the Rotom forms did in Gen 4, with that typing, blocking rapid spin, and being pretty solid against Excadrill in particular. Rotom is great against Excadrill because it's immune to ground, blocks rapid spin, and can Will-O-Wisp the guy, and it offers pivoting and stuff. This has some unique value over Jellicent, who is the other most common ghost, and the ability to pivot is important. Gengar can't do that. I think you can also run Pain Split if you want some form of recovery on it. It is pretty vulnerable to Tyranitar though, that's a downside. I am a big fan of Chandelure. It's not great though. It has Ghost Fire typing, which is awesome, but unfortunately that's a big detriment for it because it's weak to Stealth Rock, so justifying its existence is difficult. It can have both Flame Body and Flash Fire, which are great abilities. Flash Fire grants fire immunity. Doesn't really come up in Gen 5 though. Sun teams are no longer very common. Fire coverage, the only option I could think of is maybe a Garchomp Fire Blast, or perhaps a Magnezone Hidden Power Fire. Those coverage options that aim to hit Ferrothorn, but Chandelure coming in on Garchomp doesn't sound good to me. That sounds like a dangerous gambit. You can run Air Balloon to at least come in on the Earthquake, but what if they use Dragon Move? You're in shambles. So I don't know about all that, but Flame Body could have some application, perhaps. This looks fun. I want to try this in Gen 5. Maybe it's got some potential. Just very hard to justify because of its unfortunate rock weakness and like no longevity whatsoever. Also pretty low speed. But look at the special attack though. You gotta admit, that's a high special attack. You can flame charge to get speed and all of a sudden you're a threat. Wait a moment. Is Chandelure epic? Probably not. Love the visual design though. Love the name. Cofagrigus was introduced in Gen 5 and it wasn't great here, but I'll be talking about this guy shortly in the Gen 6 metagame. Stay tuned. And Golok was also introduced. Thought I'd shout this guy out. He's cool. Ground Ghost. But he's not very good. He's too slow. His stats aren't quite up to standard. Iron Fist, that's something. No Guard Dynamic Punch is something you can do with it if you like. But there's no way this has having any use in Gen 5 OU, not a chance. In Gen 6, they went a little bit crazy with 3 ghost types that weren't even legendaries that ended up getting banned to Ubers. Now this is quite a situation. And ghost types got better and worse with mechanical shifts overall. Something that made them worse was the addition of buffed knockoff to the game. Knockoff now actually dealt a lot of damage while it was knocking off enemy items, turning it into a legitimate offensive option, so skyrocketed in usage, and ghost types who are weak to dark suffered from that a little bit. But ghosts got a new property. They are now immune to trapping, which doesn't really come up in OU much because Shadow Tag is banned from the game, as is Arena Trap, but it might come up here and there. They're immune to like Magma Storm's trapping effect. Perhaps that is relevant to somebody. And also, Steel types, as of Gen 6, no longer resist Ghost. So remember Jirachi, who used to be neutral to Ghost, now it's weak to Ghost. That's a big deal. That was a huge buff to Ghost as an offensive type, making it more spammable. Steel types used to be one of the best switch-ins. Now, that is not the case. Anyway, here's Mega Gengar, and this is perhaps the most overpowered Mega Evolution there is. They gave this Shadow Tag after it Mega Evolves, and Shadow Tag is an ability that traps the enemy Pokemon with you. A famously broken concept in competitive singles ever since Wobbuffet was introduced. Even Dugtrio with Arena Trap, a more limited trapping effect, has been controversial throughout time. So Gengar has this now on its Mega form, and it has, 170 special attack, 130 speed. So I remember this being legal in Gen 6 OU back in the day for a brief amount of time before getting banned in not too long. This was absurd. This was unbelievably broken. Even if it didn't have Shadow Tag, it had like anything else that was half decent, it would be insane. Look at the guy's special attack and speed. But they gave it also unbelievable ability, which pushed it to absurd territory. And in Ubers, it is a very common Pokemon as well. It's one of the best trappers in Ubers. It's more reliable than stuff like Wobbuffet and Gothitelle for trapping. Mega Gengar has actual offensive stats. It can trap more things. So yeah, they randomly made Mega Gengar insane. It's like a legendary level Pokemon here. Aegislash was also introduced in Gen 6, and this guy is insane as well. Aegislash is a Steel Ghost type Pokemon, which is a fantastic type combination. It has the ability Stance Change, which gives it 2 different forms. Whenever Aegislash uses its attack, it becomes the Sword form, which inverts its defensive and offensive stats, giving it 150 attack and special attack, and 50 defense and special defense when it transforms into the Sword form. And then you can transform back into the Shield form to get your defenses back by using the move King's Shield, which protects you as well. And on contact, actually lowers the enemy's attack by -2. So this is a pretty unbelievable concept, right? You have all the advantages of a defensive Pokemon coming in and taking attacks very easily, and then when you want to attack, you gain offensive stats when you need them the most. This proved to be a really overwhelming Pokemon. They went a little bit too crazy with it, I would say, although I have to give respect to the design of this. It is such an awesome idea. He goes into Sword and Shield forms. I would really like to see more Pokemon designs like this, where they play around with alternate forms that you can shift between. I like that idea, but it was a little bit nuts, with the defensive typing being so excellent. It also can hold its own against Tyranitar thanks to Sacred Sword, so Pursuit is not a reliable way to deal with it, and it has such defense that it's barely taking anything from Pursuit. And when they click Pursuit, they're getting King's Shield -2 attack, so they're doing like minimum possible damage. You can also make up for a low speed stat thanks to Shadow Sneak, who has priority on it, and every time you use Shadow Sneak you turn into the Sword form, so that's fun. And we also have Mega Sableye, who was banned to Ubers. This is a rare instance where a defensive Pokemon was banned to Ubers. Mega Sableye has the ability Magic Bounce, which is one of the best abilities in all of Pokemon. It bounces back various things to the opponent, including hazards. That's the main thing that's a big deal. You can switch Mega Sableye in on Stealth Rock, and then they'll set Stealth Rock on their own side of the field. It bounces back to them. That's unreal. So it has a built-in form of hazard counterplay, and it's immune to every status ailment. It can't be taunted. It can't be hit with like Roar to get it out of the field or anything. An amazing ability. Its defensive typing is also excellent, and considering how good that ability is, these stats are very good. They're not bad at all. Previously, the only Magic Bounce users were Xatu and Espeon, who have pretty bad stats, but Mega Sableye has that, and every moveset option you can ask for, with Recovery, Will-O-Wisp, Foul Play for anti-sweeper technology. It's got it all, Mega Sab. We have Gengar back in Gen 6, and Gengar is feeling a little bit better here, because Poison typing is a bit nicer to have now. Poison typing, granting stab on Sludge Wave, is now coverage for fairy types, which exist in Gen 6. Fairy types are weak to poison. So Gengar's stab combination of Ghost and Poison feels a bit better. Gengar also benefited from that nerf to steel types quite a lot. They can no longer resist Ghost. Now Mega Banette is an interesting one. Not a popular Mega Evolution in Gen 6. Not ranked in OU. Hard to justify using this as your one per team Mega when such threats as Mega Metagross and Mega Lopunny are right there and tend to be better, but Mega Banette is at least interesting. It has Prankster when it Mega Evolves, which grants priority to non-attacking moves, so Mega Banette is slow and not very bulky, similar stats to the base form Banette, to be honest, except of course for that monstrous attack stat. But the guy has priority Taunt, priority Will-O-Wisp, that's something. That makes up for your low speed a little bit. And unfortunately, Ghost type attacking options aren't the best on the physical side, with Shadow Claw being your best bet, and with only 70 power. Do you even get fighting type coverage? Let me take a quick look. I don't think it does. It gets knockoff, but that's kind of overlap with Ghost for the types it hits. Doesn't get any fighting type coverage on the physical side. Back in Gen 3, it could have at least used physical hidden power fighting, but without fighting type coverage, it gets a little bit eaten alive by Pursuit and all the dark types running around, which are far more common now. So Banette Mega suffered a little bit in that regard. And Hooper also exists. I think this was like a mythical or something. This guy is a psychic Ghost type, which is not a good combination. ×4 dark weakness is going to cause a lot of problems for you, with knockoff rising in popularity so much, dark types in general rising so much, and Hooper is slower than most of them, and it's vulnerable to Pursuit. It's also ×4 weak to Ghost, so like Shadow Sneak will snipe it, a Gengar Shadow Ball will get it. What a nightmare of a type combination for Gen 6 OU. Truly poor timing for Hooper. And of course we have the legend himself, Cofagrigus. This Pokemon has risen significantly in popularity in the modern Gen 6 OU metagame for its unique role as a defensive Ghost type. With Mega Sableye banned, there was a gap to fill for that defensive Ghost role, and Cofagrigus, with its high defense, decent enough special defense, can function as a mixed wall. Can also be used to block Rapid Spin. It's a good switch into Excadrill, the most common Rapid Spinner. And on top of that, Cofagrigus has the ability Mummy, which basically erases the enemy's ability if they make contact with you. If an enemy makes contact, their ability will be changed to Mummy. Great against Pokemon like Azumarill, who loses huge power. Mega Lopunny, who uses Scrappy. Mega Medicham, who also has pure power. There's a lot of common applications for this. And on top of that, Cofagrigus has Toxic Spikes on it, which is useful utility. Some of them are in Rest for more reliable healing and some anti-status. Yeah, but you can go Hex, Will-O-Wisp combo. You can go Protect for chip healing in that sense, or Pain Split for some form of recovery like that. Some mix and matching in the moveset. Very cool Pokemon. I talked about it in my most recent video too. That was a video about Pokemon that rose significantly over time, that were overlooked when their metagame was current. Cofagrigus is definitely a great example of that. In Gen 7 we have 2 OU ranked ghost types, but look at this. A tragedy happened in Gen 7. They took away Gengar's best trait. It no longer has Levitate. And this was for lore reasons. It was very important because Gengar is clearly standing on 2 feet on the ground. It is not levitating. So for that reason it cannot have an ability that does not correspond with what it's doing. So I think I welcome that change. Perhaps they could have animated him flying above the ground instead of standing on the floor, but that would have taken some extra resources that was not worth their time, so they gave him Cursed Body instead. And this goes down in history as the only time a logical inconsistency has ever existed in the Pokemon franchise. Gengar levitating, even though it was not levitating. There are no other examples of anything like this, and from here on out, Pokemon would be praised for its consistency in its lore and how accurate its abilities are to the Pokemon in question. Mega Sableye is OU this time, it's not Ubers. I think because overall the metagame has more offensive tools with Z-moves existing, more powerful offensive Pokemon like the Ultra Beasts and the Tapus, making Stall strategies a little bit less consistent and powerful. So Mega Sableye wasn't banned this time, but still definitely a immoral Pokemon. I never enjoyed facing this one. As for new ghost types in the world, Blacephalon's probably the most relevant. An all-new fire ghost type with a very offensive attitude. Despite being weak to Stealth Rock, Pursuit, Knockoff, a lot of common stuff, Blacephalon outpaces all of these things with sheer brute force, with its solid speed stat, enormous special attack stat of 151, and Beast Boost, an ability that grants a boost to your highest stat if you attack and KO another Pokemon, allowing Blacephalon to snowball and defeat various enemies, gaining multiple special attack boosts and breaking through big time. This is a solid special attacking wall breaker with a good offensive type combination, access to Trick for some disruption, and a bit of moveset variety too. I believe there was a Flame Charge set people used. Mimikyu is another new ghost type. This guy's UU ranked, but I used to use this in Gen 7 OU back when that was current. On Hyper Offense teams, I think it's a cool Pokemon. It's Ghost Fairy type, which is a great type combo. Stats aren't the best, pretty low in the way of attack and bulk, but it's got the ability to disguise, which is really cool. It's like a free substitute, and you basically have a safety net against the first attack that you receive. It will deal 0 damage against you and then break the disguise. So with this disguise, you can freely set up a Swords Dance, and you have Shadow Sneak to take advantage of that. You've got Stab Play Rough. Good stab combination, solid defensive typing, and a safety net for setup. I like this Pokemon. Marowak Alola was another new ghost type that I feel like I saw a bit back in the day, occasionally. Maybe because it was new and people wanted to give it a go. It's got the same thick club item that regular Marowak can get, but it's got a fire ghost type combo, which is interesting. Access to Stab Flare Blitz with Rock Head for immunity to the recoil damage. That's cool. Has Shadow Bone, an actual good ghost type physical attack. And I think I saw this on Trick Room teams is where I saw this. Is this slower than regular Marowak? I think it is. But on Trick Room teams, this could go in. Trick Room teams aren't the best though, but you occasionally saw them in Gen 7. For whatever reason, people were doing that. We remember back in Gen 6, ghost types received the buff of immunity to trapping effects. They also were no longer worried about steel resistance. Steel no longer resisted ghost. But in Gen 8, ghosts received the best indirect buff yet, because Pursuit was entirely removed from the game. Pursuit no longer exists in Generation 8. So ghost types can roam free, finally. Pursuit was the one thing keeping them down, really. Blacephalon already had enough offensively going for it to make up for its weakness to Pursuit, but now with no Pursuit at all, Blacephalon is loving life. And in Generation 8, this change was timed with the release of one of the strongest ghost types we have ever seen, Dragapult. Dragapult has a huge amount going for it. It's the new pseudo-legendary of Gen 8, and the most immediately noticeable advantage it has is that massive 142 base speed, which is through the roof. Its attacking stats are modest. It's 100 space special attack. 120 attack is very good, but Dragapult doesn't get that many physical attacking options. It doesn't get reliable ghost stab or any coverage really. Most of its move pool consists of special attacks, but with that enormous speed stat, Stab Draco Meteor, and the very spammable Shadow Ball, plus no Pursuit to worry about, Dragapult immediately saw success in Gen 8. The ability Infiltrator is also really good, ignoring Substitute. Dragapult has quite a lot of set variety. Choice Specs is the most common option on Dragapult, but you can go with a Dragon Dance set if you like. Although you don't have that many physical attacking options, you do have Stab Dragon Darts, and Phantom Force, which requires you to charge up, kind of like fly. Not a fantastic option, but if you want to take advantage of the high attack stat, you can with this. This is something I enjoy about Dragapult, is that it has a high attack stat but poor attacking options, which is an interesting design decision in my opinion. It gives it more variety in what it can do. I like when they have a little bit of restraint. If this just had like Earthquake in close combat or whatever, it would not be as interesting of a Pokemon, would it? I also remember seeing some sets like this on Dragapult back in Gen 8 OU with Substitute Disable and Will-O-Wisp Hex. A more utility Dragapult, probably with HP investment. U-Turn is another one of its most prominent tools. The ability to directly pivot out is always fantastic. I quite like Dragapult. In terms of powerful modern Pokemon designs that are prominent and competitive, it has a reasonable special attack of only 100. It has a lot of moveset options you can mix and match, a good mix of special attacks, utility, pivoting, status, all these kinds of things. And I don't think it's too overwhelming to actually defensively answer. There's plenty of things that can check Dragapult. It's just a consistent, reliable, fast attacker, and I think it does enhance the Gen 8 and Gen 9 metagame. You've heard about French Pokemon, but what about a British Pokemon? Poltegeist was introduced in Generation 8, a tea-themed Pokemon with a very controversial future paradox form associated with its prior evolution Sinistee, but we won't get into all of that today. Poltegeist is ranked in RU, but I think it sees occasional use on hyper offense teams. Poltegeist has a really good special attack stat, and the combination of Shell Smash, one of the best boosts in the game, which gives you times to attack, special attack, and speed all at once in a single turn, and Stored Power, which deals damage for each stat boost that you have, which is excellent because you're receiving so many stat boosts from Shell Smash, so many different stat boosts, giving this a huge amount of power. Weak Armor can also proc, granting even more stat boosts to boost up stored power, and this works very well alongside Psychic Terrain from Tapu Lele, because you are immune to priority attacks thanks to Psychic Terrain, and it also boosts the damage of stored power. So this can be a hyper offense Pokemon. Kind of interesting. And I gotta be honest folks, Gen 8 is a metagame that I have a bit of a knowledge gap on. I know a bit about it, but there are some things that elude me. Because I played it when it was first released, I played a bit of OU, but then I became more interested in the older generations. So I'm wondering, why the heck is Aegislash UUBL? Isn't this an outstanding Pokemon? There's no Pursuit anymore. It's got Stab Shadow Ball. You can go Choice Specs. You can just spam Shadow Ball to your heart's content. You got Shadow Sneak. What else have we got on this? Swords Dance? I mean, isn't this just an excellent Pokemon? Perhaps this is an outdated ranking, because the rankings are frozen in time from when it was current gen. Maybe Aegislash is a viable choice in modern Gen 8 OU? I don't know. Please enlighten me, because I feel like this guy is not OU and I can't explain to you why, because I'm pretty sure it's still Ghost and it has every advantage you could ask for. Is it just weak against... maybe it's competing with Dragapult, but it has its own value. It's more defensively oriented, isn't it? Is it bad against Melmetal? No. Is it bad against Rillaboom? This is a moment where I'm asking you to help me. Usually I'm the one informing you. I need you to tell me why Aegislash is UUBL here. Let me know, folks. Finally, here we are in Generation 9 OU. And let me tell you, folks, there has been quite a bit of Ghost-type controversy in this generation throughout its run. In Generation 9, they released the absurd move Last Respects, which has a plus 50 power for each party member on your team that is fainted. So in 6v6 singles, where you have 5 teammates that can faint, this can achieve a base power of, 350 on a Ghost-type attack. That can one-hit KO resistances that can one-hit KO just about everything on the planet. So early on, teams using Houndstone and Tyranitar for the Sandrush boosts were near unbeatable. This was an absurd level strategy. You do have to lose your whole team, but then once you do, you just have a instant win button, don't you? Another Pokemon that can take advantage of this is Bascu Legion, who has even been controversial in the Ubers format for having this option. And this is even better. This has Swift Swim. This was introduced when Pokemon Home was released, and it has a higher attack stat. It can receive the buff in the rain. And we had another absurd Ghost-type attack on this Pokemon right here, Annihilape, the new evolution for Primeape with a Ghost-Fighting typing. And Annihilape has the move Rage Fist, which receives plus 50 power for each time you are hit. And this does not reset when you switch out. This is a permanent buff to the move. So you can just switch Annihilape in once, and you have 100 base power Ghost-type attack. That's powerful enough, but it increments every time you're hit. And you have Bulk Up, Taunt to prevent like Ting Lu from whirlwinding you out, or various other counterplay to this. Drain Punch to heal all your health back, and with Terastallization to turn you into a water type. This was pretty ridiculous. You could Terastallize, resist the incoming hit that's trying to get you, a Ghost type attack, hit him with Rage Fist. They're charging up your Rage Fist every time they try to defeat you. you're healing in the process with Drain Punch. This was unbelievable to fight. It would just snowball out of control in 2 seconds, especially when Cyclozar was a teammate, because you could Shed Tail to pass a substitute to the guy, and then what the hell do you do? It's behind a substitute, it's boosting up, it's charging up Rage Fist, it's going crazy. It really shows just how good Ghost type can be offensively when you give it actual attacks. Not just actual attacks, but really overpowered attacks, like Rage Fist and Last Respects. But Jimothy, if Misdreavus 2 is so great, then where is Misdreavus 3? May I introduce you to Flutter Mane? This was yet another absurd Ghost type introduced in Gen 9. It has the stats of a legendary Pokemon with 135 special attack, special defense, and speed, and outstanding Ghost Fairy typing. All the moveset options you could want in the world, and the ability Photosynthesis granting a sunny day boost to your highest stat. If Sun is active, so you can get a free choice scarf basically on this in the Sun. Is that hard to do? No. You just put Torkoal on or whatever. Koraidon in Ubers. This sure is a Pokemon. And now it's time to talk about this guy, Goldengo. Anybody recognize this Pokemon? You ever seen this in Gen 9 OU? A little lesser seen choice. Goldengo is one of the most controversial Pokemon ever done, and an outstanding new Ghost type. Also my channel mascot a little bit. Isn't that fun? Goldengo looks a little bit ridiculous, but I kind of like him. He looks like the cheese stringer. And he has the ability Good as Gold, which is one of the strongest abilities Pokemon has ever seen, granting a complete immunity to status moves. So that means, you know, Spore, Thunderwave, Will-O-Wisp, Goldengo's completely immune. But something that many people didn't realize at first when they read this ability was that status moves encompasses just about any non-attacking move ever. Defog is a status move. Trick is a status move. Encore is a status move. All these kinds of effects that you apply to an enemy that aren't attacks, most of them are status moves. And Goldengo is immune to all of those, which is pretty insane. The most significant thing it's immune to is Defog, because previously Defog was a safe way to remove hazards from the field. It couldn't be blocked by Ghost types, but now here's another Ghost type that is blocking hazard removal in every form. Goldengo is immune to Rapid Spin and Defog. So Goldengo is the ultimate hazard stacking champion, and has been the cornerstone of offensive strategy since the beginning that aim to stack hazards as much as possible. And Goldengo is no slouch beyond that. It has a 133 special attack. That's really good. Its other stats are pretty average, but with the sheer power of Good as Gold and all its useful applications, and a great move pool, it's got Recovery, the signature move Make It Rain, which is 120 power, and only one special attack stat decrease associated with it. That's better than Draco Meteor. It's more accurate than Draco Meteor. And Steel is not a bad offensive type these days, with fairies running around. Shadow Ball, some solid, strong Ghost Stab. I mean, Goldengo is excellent in every regard, isn't it? And it's also an honorable and trustworthy Pokemon that has never done anything wrong in terms of, like, corruption or evading the law. Something that you have to understand about Goldengo, he always pays his taxes on time. He's never done anything illicit. And he has no ties with the Smogon Council, so stop saying that. Stop saying that he's paying the Smogon Council to prevent himself from getting banned. That's stupid. Why would you think that? Just because he's made of solid gold, he has a lot of coins to throw around? You think he's paying people in high positions to benefit him? No. How could you say such a thing? Skeledirge has been another relevant Ghost type in the Gen 9 metagame throughout its lifespan. Currently ranked UU, not particularly popular in the current metagame, but in the past has been a fantastic defensive answer to such things as Volcarona, all the offensive boost sweepers running around, because Skeledirge has access to Unaware, which completely ignores enemy stat changes, one of the best abilities in the game, and it has solid defensive stats to support such a thing. With heavy-duty boots, you can sidestep that pesky rock weakness, and your move pool is pretty fantastic. You've got reliable healing in the form of Slack Off, the signature move Torch Song, which gives you a 100% chance to raise your special attack by 1 on hit, which is really good. This can turn Skeledirge into a bit of a win condition sometimes. This also goes through Substitute because it's sounder-based, that's useful. And Will-O-Wisp shuts down those physical attackers that you're aiming to defeat, as does Hex. I think a metagame trend that has been bad for Skeledirge is the introduction of Gouging Fire, a Dragon Dance sweeper who ×4 resists fire, is immune to burn, and has Earthquake to threaten you. You can Terra Fairy, but then you're vulnerable to simple stab fire moves, aren't you? So you kind of suck against Gouging Fire, who previously didn't exist, but Skeledirge still has its place on certain teams. Ceruledge is another new Ghost type, a pretty interesting one, with a very hyper-offensive style to it. Usually uses the ability Weak Armor, which, if you get hit by a physical attack, raises your speed by 2 at the cost of lowering your defense. And alongside a Focus Sash and Bitter Blade, which can heal you up with its stab damage, Swords Dance to boost up, Shadow Sneak for priority. This was alright on some hyper-offense teams throughout Gen 9's history so far, In one of the DLC updates, it also got Poltergeist as a far better ghost stab option than Shadow Claw. This is way higher power of 110, really strong actually. And Ceruledge can also run Flash Fire. In the past it used to run a set with, I believe it gets Bulk Up, doesn't it? Bulk Up, Flash Fire, and you could do Terra Bug actually. Terra Bug allowed you to resist ground while also cancelling out your fire weakness thanks to Flash Fire, a rare instance where Bug is a good defensive typing on a set like this, and you can run Leftovers or Boots. I don't think these sets are as popular anymore with Bulk Up, Bitterblade, and Taunt, but this had its time in the sun in the past. Hisui and Zoroark became available in Gen 9 with the Pokemon Home update, allowing us to use Legends Arceus Pokemon in Gen 9 OU. And this is the first ever Pokemon with a normal ghost type combination, which is outstanding, extremely complementary. Normal types are weak to fighting, but Ghost is immune to fighting, so they cancel that out. And guess what Ghost type is weak to? Itself is weak to Ghost, but Normal is immune to Ghost, so they cancel out two of each other's weaknesses. This type combination only has one weakness, to Dark, and with the ability Illusion, which allows you to disguise as another Pokemon on your team temporarily, you can unexpectedly be immune to stuff that they think you're weak to, and get a bit of surprise value from that. You've got a respectable 125 base special attack and a good speed stat too. But this Pokemon is very frail, struggles to hit the field against a lot of stuff, and it's competing with Dragapult, who is much faster and overall more useful than Zoroark Hisui, a bit bulkier, has more useful resistances. There was a time when this was ranked in OU. It was quite solid at a point, but at the moment it has fallen down. And finally we have Sinistcha, one of the most epic Pokemon ever done. This is a cup, and my cup runneth over when I see this because it's just full of life. It's full of heart. This is a grass ghost type. It has the ability Heat Proof, granting fire resistance. I mean, that's fantastic. And it's got the signature move Matcha Gotcha, which has both a burn chance and recovery on it. That's a 2-in-1 deal. That's an absolute steal. It's got Strength Sap. Guess what? That's going to heal you significantly while lowering the enemy's attack stat. It's got Shadow Ball. That's Ghost. That's a ghost type attack. I use that. This is a Pokemon with legs to stand on. This was recently used in a Probopass team that made strides in the community, because if you can eliminate King Gambit reliably, this guy kind of goes crazy, doesn't it? King Gambit being a very big public enemy for ghost types, thanks to its Sucker Punch and Kowtow Cleave and powerful Supreme Overlord ability. But if you can eliminate that guy, Sinistcha is pretty excellent, matches up well against Great Tusk and other such things. It heals itself, it can Strength Sap things, it can Calm Mind and be a win condition. I really like the guy. I have respect for this Pokemon. I gotta admit, in my video when I first saw this thing, I vastly overrated it. I thought it would be OU. I thought it would be much better than it ended up being, but I give it some props for having some niche use on teams recently, and being okay sometimes in OU. And that does it for my Ghost type overview, folks. I think most would agree that Ghost is among the best types in the game, but interestingly, there's not that many Ghost types ranked in OU throughout the years. Usually, there's a couple at the top that kind of just do everything you need to do, and they outclass all the other ones. And Ghost types are also still kind of rare. They don't prop up as often as other types, but it always seems that there's one or two ghost types in a meta that hold the world on their shoulders. And some of the most pivotal Pokemon in history have been ghost types. What do you think of the ghost type overall? And who's your favorite? Mine is Bennett. What about you? Let me know down below in the comments, and thank you for watching.